people need hope, no matter what situation they are in life. It's particularly important for people who've been through trauma or have serious healthcare issues. We're going to be hearing about this topic of hope and the importance of hopefulness from one of the world's experts on the issue, Ben Korn, who's a seasoned oncologist living in Israel. Welcome, Ben.
Great to be here. Thank you, Bruce.
So, Ben, tell us a little bit about your general take on hope and why it's important.
Right. Well, I think there really is a fundamental need for hope. My interest is in looking at hope in a somewhat radical way as a pragmatic tool that all of us can find use for. And therefore, I think it's important to define hope and to be able to measure it and to see how we can use it as a tool.
Ray, how did you first get engaged in this issue?
Well, my story is actually somewhat personal. When I was 11 years old, my dad died at a very young age of prostate cancer. The whole process was sort of shielded for very good intentions from myself and from my siblings. But I felt abandoned by the medical system, by the community, by local rabbis who just didn't have an understanding of what an impact this would have. And it dawned on me later in medical school, when I thought I was studying medicine to cure prostate cancer, that nothing had really changed in the interval since I was 11 years old. And I started to search for this magic element, which I later understood was hope, that could restore meaning in a person's life.
I can imagine as an oncologist that's particularly important. Can you give us some examples, obviously without patient names, but how does hope and hopefulness play a role in your work as an oncologist?
Well, the essence of hope is being able to select a goal that's meaningful and achievable, figuring out the pathway to get there, knowing there might be obstacles that impede our approach towards our goal, and finding the motivation to set out on that pathway. In oncology, we've made tremendous strides in the last 10 or 15 years in particular. However, there's still many incurable diseases. And a problem that myself and colleagues are susceptible to is creating an equation that hope equals cure. Well, that's very limiting, because what do you do when somebody no longer has curable disease? That's difficult for the patient and it's frustrating for the healthcare professional. Hopefulness and hope theory allows us to have a reorientation where we understand that even though we might not be able to conquer the cancer itself, there's no reason to deny hopefulness to a human being. And we can very slowly seek other goals which will restore meaning in a person's life. And we have the data now that shows that when we do this, people can enhance their quality of life, all the while knowing that they might not be able to overcome the disease itself.
Well, you grew up and trained in the United States. In fact, you and I went to the same high school, Yeshiva Flatbush, and then you moved to Israel at a certain point. What are some of the uniquely Israeli aspects of this issue, and what lessons might they have for people in the United States and around the world?
Well, first of all, thanks for the shout out to our alma mater, if you will. But I think we both know that the national anthem of this country is called Hatikva, which means the hope. Now, of course, much of this relates to the dream of diaspora Jews to return to a homeland. But there are very few precedents, actually, of transgenerational hope, where individuals can pass on a sense of hope to descendants who can persevere and pursue a goal, which in this case might be establishing the state of Israel, which was born in 1948. And I think that relates to the fact that there's almost hopefulness that's built into the DNA of Israelis. So they're very receptive to this idea. And it doesn't take much to dislodge a patient of mine from just focus on the issue of cure to entertaining other goals. And there are multiple examples of this where I think a hope-directed approach can actually help with decision-making and deal with some of the dissonance that might be out there. One example, if I can give you very quickly, might be a patient of mine. I have an expertise in brain tumors, who had a recurrence of his cancer. There was a very expensive therapy, which if he paid for out of pocket to the tune of about $10,000 a month and took that for 6 months, he would have an extension of survival for about 2 or 3 weeks. We had a very heart-to-heart conversation in my office with him, his wife, and his daughter, who was about to be married. He said, "Abba, I want not to have any of the trappings of the wedding. I want you to have this therapy. And together we processed this, and they realized that actually what was more important was that this was an only daughter who was getting married at an older age. They wanted to have this wedding. And he decided, and had no dissonance with it, that this is what would give him hope. And I have an incredible picture of him taking his daughter to the wedding canopy, to the chuppah, and being just so appreciative of this opportunity, all the while knowing that he just had a few more months to live.
That's very moving for me personally because my best friend, who died about a decade ago, had cancer, and his son moved up the wedding so that the father could be there. This was at Shaare Zedek, and we had the wedding in the courtyard of Shaare Zedek.
Oh, that's incredible.
I know that your work has resonance around the world. I know you've just come back from a trip to the U.S. where you were invited speaker at keynote speaker at various conferences where there's really interest in your work. I know that many foundations from abroad and donors are interested in supporting your work. So really, I think it's a great credit to you and your work. And it's, I think we in Israel are proud that you're one of our ambassadors that take the good work from Israel and spread it around the world. So Ben, thank you for what you do every day. And thank you for bringing hope into so many people's lives. And thank you for joining us here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for this opportunity.